Good afternoon, everybody. A huge, enormous, and warm springtime welcome to today's Friday Insight, hosted by the National Army Museum. Thank you to all of you who continue to log in and have become regulars. Hello to some of our new viewers and listeners as well. It's great to see you. We've got a fantastic talk today, and I'm really excited. And thankfully, you won't be hearing too much from me, but what you'll be hearing is a fantastic presentation. So today we are going to talk about Operation Granby, the Gulf War, Desert Storm, all of these names that sometimes are attracted and put to these conflict that took place 30 years ago. We're joined today by Lieutenant Colonel Tim Purbrick, who was a tank commander on Granby. He joined the 17th 21st Lancers in Munster, West Germany, serving as a sabre troop leader and then as a recce troop leader. He was short-toured from an operational tour in Northern Ireland in 1990 to serve as a troop commander in the squadron of the 17th 21st Lancers that were attached to the Irish Hussars battle group for Operation Granby. And with them, he went to war, and he's going to share his stories and memories with us today. As always, a few technical pointers from me. If your stream freezes at any point, we suggest you simply click the refresh button at the top of your browser. A member of our team will be active in the chat bar to assist you should you have any other issues or queries. Should we encounter any technical issues, please do bear with us while we work to rectify them. As you can probably guess and tell, we're all doing this from home. So sometimes things do happen, but touch wood, we should be okay. The advantage of this, of course, is we're able to welcome so many people already from different parts of the world. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, without much further ado, I will hand over to you, Tim. A huge round of applause, a great welcome, and I can't wait for this. So thanks very much.
Peter, thank you very much indeed for inviting me along. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be with you again. And this is going to be my view of the war. And so it's not anyone else's view. There's no strategic look over the whole thing. It's definitely my worm's eye view of what happened. And we're going to look at a bit about how I got into the army, where I was in Northern Ireland, what happened. We're then going to look at the build up in Saudi, and then we got the war and a bit of the aftermath. So that's the program. So to start off with, let's go to the first slide. He said, let's see if we can do it from this one down here. Okay. There we go. So I should have been a Grenadier Guard. That's my great-grandfather on the left and my great-uncle on the right. The one on the left, great-grandfather, won a DSO and MC in the First War. Great-uncle won a DSO and an MC in the Second War, both commanded battalions of Grenadiers. But I didn't become a Grenadier. No, because of Uncle Bloody Reggie. There he is in the middle. That's my cousin Arthur, who's now serving on the left there, serving in the regiment, and me on the right. Uncle Reggie of Asparagus Field fame was commanding the regiment in the 1980s. And it was the motto, the skull and crossbones, as we call it, was the cap badge that I was brought up with, as you can see here. And so I naturally joined the 17th 21st Lancers, which at the time were based here in Munster, in West Germany. And there it is, Lodenheider Barracks, Swinton Kaserne, on the outskirts of the wonderful Westphalian town of Munster. And there's, just if you look in the middle there, this is the officers' mess here. It was a barracks that was built, I think, temporarily, and we were still in it in the 1980s. So we spent most of my first year in A Squadron, commanded by Patrick Marriott, who went on to become the commandant at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. And there we are with our Challenger 1, it's become Challenger main battle tanks, parked up in a back street during some enormous exercise in West Germany. I spent a year as a recce troop leader, and we spent quite a bit of time in Stuhlmacher's downtown in Munster, which is a great bar, and had met loads of friends. And this is the Furstenbergs, who are like the von Trapp family in Westphalia, who looked after me and became my German family while I was there. But there came a moment in my military career where the commanding officer said, right, Tim, this was Andrew Cumming, went on to become a major general. It's about time you became a regular officer. Now in the 17th 21st Lancers, most regular officers, when they were going from a short service commission to regular, said, which country you want to go and play polo in, Argentina or New Zealand? And I said, actually, I'd like to go and spend some time in Northern Ireland. Commanding officer nearly fell off his chair, but I was sent off to 11 UDR at Portadown here in the province in Northern Ireland. And there's the barracks, Mahon Road, down in the south there. I did spend quite a lot of my time mowing Alan Brookborough's lawn down at Colebrook in County Fermanagh with a pistol shoved in my belt. I'm not sure I was either good at mowing, or I certainly wasn't much good with a pistol either. But just as I was sitting in the ops room on that day in August, along the news came that Saddam Hussein had invaded invaded Kuwait, and we sat rapt listening to this news on the TV. We had to look at where Kuwait is, and there it is, and he'd invaded because Iraq had traditionally claimed Kuwait as a 19th province, and he had also claimed that the Kuwaitis were drilling oil across the border there, and that everyone else was worried that the Iraqis would continue down the border here, down the Saudi coast, and seize all the oil wells. So moving on, George Bush immediately deployed American troops into Saudi, into blocking positions to stop that happening. And I was summoned back, having got on the telephone to the adjutant, Andrew Hughes, and pleaded my case. I was told to get lost. I'd already been on some operational tour, and so I should stay with 11 UDR. But the call came a few weeks later, and there's me with Brad Nichols, my troop sergeant, outside Swinton Caserna in Munster. And strapped to the back of the motorcycle here is a Mossberg combat shotgun. One of our officers had smuggled 6 of them or so through customs in the back of his Porsche, drove them all the way to Munster, and we each had one of them for apparently disposing of vermin when we were deployed to the desert. So here's Brad and I, we're deploying up to Fallingbostel, 130, 40 miles an hour on the back of his motorbike. And as you can see here, wearing my very appropriate Chinese fighting suit, which would be absolutely useless if we had a crash, but luckily we made it very safely there under his careful guidance, all the way up to Fallingbostel, because at Fallingbostel was the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars, rapidly becoming the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars battle group, and that's part of the 7th Armoured Brigade, the Desert Rats. The Irish Hussars, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Denaro, and the 7th Armoured Brigade, commanded by Brigadier Patrick Cordingley. After a few weeks training in Germany and a bit of toing and froing backwards and forwards, lastminute.com, the tanks were sent away, and we eventually got on a plane and we flew. I remember it being in the cockpit of the plane as we flew down the Nile over the pyramids and then across Saudi, and we bumped into Al Duran down here, the yellow arrow, before getting on buses and heading up to Al Jabal to the dockside there, where we were billeted, sorry about the picture, in a huge hangar, and this became home. As you can see, we were appropriately fitted out with the useless camp beds that the army had at the time, and of course a winter sleeping bag, very, very useful in those circumstances. Lots of water to drink, dog tags already on, as you can see. We had a very nice day out in the desert where we could go out and sort of do some desert familiarization, it was called. And what was amazing there is no light pollution in Saudi or where we were, and the starlit night was staggering. Absolutely amazing. Never seen it before, and probably won't see it again until I go back to some dim, distant past where there is no light pollution. That was incredible. We soon got the wagons and deployed into the desert, where we started doing some training, practicing moving leaguers, moving into leaguers last thing at night, camming up, camming down, movement, squadron attacks, that kind of thing. We eventually got on the ranges, got some ammunition, our wagons, and it was great that Vickers turned out there to see us, and I don't know whether you can see that there, but we were all part of the Desert Rats Supporters Club, or Vickers part of it, and we were quite amazed that civilians had deployed into the desert to help us, and they were a big help, so thank you, Vickers, for that. Some quite sharp body in the MOD soon worked out that actually, if we carried on driving the wagons as much as we were doing, we were going to hammer them out before the war. So we then went on to track mileage restrictions, which meant that we went to visit, and there's other people, and here's Chubby Tim in a Cobra helicopter, and we were amazed by the amount of sort of candy the Americans had in their bases, and that was before sort of anyone had kind of got to sending us mail out in the desert. But it was great to go and visit them. A lot of maintenance. We had replacement filters put on our tanks for not only the NBC pack on the back of the wagon here, but also in the engine to stop the ingestion of dust and sand into the engines, which was causing quite a few. And you can see one here going on, pack lifts that were going on. Sometimes we just took the engines out just to do a bit of maintenance, and that's a good place to send the troop leader to dig out the grubby oil and sand from the bottom of the engine bay. Sometimes we broke down. This is my wagon, 4-0, you can see here, and the front idler seal went, so that was the end of that. Track broken, and we had to wait 2 days where we were. Sadly missed Jim Davidson in the desert as we sat there waiting for a new idler to come out from Germany. And we had some other interesting people come and meet us. There camels. It's just extraordinary. They just pop out of the desert from nowhere, bloke with a bottle of water and about 20, 30 camels, and they just sort of quite happily mosey on past us. We had a lot of media visits come out and see us. This Sky News, and then we had the current bun, the Sun, came to give us Christmas puds. They were the size of a 50p, but hey, it's the thought that counted, and it was really nice to have that amount of attention paid to us, that people were taking interest in us around Christmas time. So here we have the 17th, 21st Lancers deployed with the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars Battle Group. Piers Hankinson here, Tim Buxton, me, Will Wyatt, and Nick Cotton. As you can see, all sorts of forms of dress, and we really took to heart the 7th Armoured Brigade of the Second World War, and wore pretty much what we liked as long as it was comfortable. We had a visit from His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, which was fantastic, actually, really morale boosting. Although the commanding officer did say later that he spent an age trying to make the Prince of Wales's beret look less like a helicopter landing pad and more like a beret, but it was great. And he talked to us, and that was it was really nice. Here are the officers of D Squadron of the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars Battle Group, and I'll just run through who they are. This is Major Toby Madison here of the Irish Hussars. This is Captain Phil Napier, who's Royal Regiment of Wales, so infantry on attachment to the cab. That's me. Alex Payne, Battle Captain, and Alex Cormack, Troop Leader, and Chris Millett, another Troop Leader. Paul Sanford and Webbo were both running around in ferrets. Not quite sure they were doing. Liaison officers, I think we put them down as. Here we are up armoring our wagons. We put an extra several tons of Chobham armor on the sides to improve the protection. In Germany, of course, where we were mostly going to be operating, we thought you could use the land to hide yourself from the flanks. In the desert, of course, there's not really anywhere to hide. So we had some additional Chobham put on. The interesting thing about it was it didn't really make a performance delta to the performance of the wagon as we were driving around. And there's a shot before up armoring. Here's a shot up armoring, so you can see it all there. And this is before we had the explosive reactive armor put on the front of the tanks. One day we were getting quite bored with the sitting around bit, so Toby borrowed the Padres wagon, and we drove up to Khafji, and this is Kuwait here. So the bad guys were in all this area here. And we just drove up to Khafji. There was absolutely nothing on the road. And when we got there, here is the border post in the background. And there's Philip and Chris and Alex, Staff Sparks from Recce Troop, Sergeant Robertson from D Squadron, Al Murdoch, Recce Troop Leader, and Alex Cormack. And there were a few civvies who were camped by the border just by here, but there was really just nothing there. And there was nothing really evident on the road between us. And it was only a few weeks later that the Iraqis came across the border with their turrets reversed. In other words, usually the sign of surrendering, white flags flying, definitely the sign of surrendering. And then they flipped their turrets around and started shooting up Khafji. But we then went from Khafji a little bit to the west out into the desert, and we came across this little Beaugest fort in the desert. And these are recent taken from Google, but it's still there. And there was American Special Forces unit there, and they had guns and sniper rifles and night sights all set up on the roof here. And we sort of went and had a quick chat to them and looked through their sights across the border. And over here, I could see when I looked through sort of diggers digging and trenches, and there were some bodies sort of running around. So that was the enemy, and that was a bit of an interesting moment before their ops officer came and slung us out, and we retreated to Khafji for a very nice lunch of chicken and Pepsi or whatever it was before going back down south. And it wasn't long before, so just orientate yourself here. So this is where we were based, just northwest of Al Jubail. Here's Kuwait, here's Iraq up here, and we pulled over to the west in preparation for Norman Schwarzkopf's big right hook into Kuwait. So all the Iraqis are sitting in here expecting us to come up this way and digging their fire trenches and minefields and so forth, and we were going to come this way. So there was a bit of a hush-hush moment as we moved over to the west. We had Christmas in the desert, which was fantastic, and then it was more going into leaguers and practicing. As you can see, there's a pack lift going on here, some maint going on in the background. And then here we are, this is Pete Lee, my operator, and Brew, the driver, and Gus, the gunner. And here we are having supper. And as you can see, it was all being dished out in dog bowls and mess tins and so forth. And we had a shower thing that went on the barrel to have a shower in the once a week or once ever. Corporal Urbax, who's a troop corporal. And here we go. And we'd been swapping mottos for American camp cots, which was great. And this is Bob Hawksley. Sadly, he was killed a few years later in a training accident in Canada. And this is by their 4-2's tank, so a troop corporal's tank. More Lancer officers, again, rigged in all sorts of different kind of gear. A picture of the officers of the Irish Hussars battle group before we went to war. And we had officers from the Royal Regiment of Wales, from the 5th Skins, the Padre, the Medic, Royal Tank Regiment, Canadian Regiment affiliated with the Irish Hussars. And we even had an SAS officer who, unfortunately for him, had timed his infantry attachment to us for the Gulf War. I'm sure he'd much rather be in another place. So that's what the average Lancer officer was wearing at war. Mossberg combat shotgun. This is an Uzi machine pistol here and a 9mm a Browning pistol. You might wonder about the Uzi. Well, it was the bandmaster turned up with his violin case at my troop hide one day, and he said, "Hello, sir." I said, "Hi, bandmaster. You brought us a violin. That's really good." And he said, "I've got something inside it for you, sir." And opened it up. This is Mr. Harrod, who was our bandmaster. Opened it up, and there was a little sacking case, a sandbag. And he said, "This is for you from your dad." I pulled it out, and there was an Uzi machine pistol that my father had acquired from some arms dealer somewhere, a bit like the Mossberg combat shotguns, and sent it out to me. Bandmaster said he had a bit of an issue getting it out. He arrived at Bryce Norton and he put his violin case on the counter, and he said, "I think you need to know what's in here." And the RAF police said, "I don't want to know what's in your violin case. I want you to just get on that plane and go away." And it transpired that the day before there'd been an SAS squadron that had come through Bryce, and when the RAF police had asked them to de-kit and show them what they were carrying onto the plane, the amount of knives, knuckle dusters, hand grenades, or whatever it was those guys were carrying, the RAF police just went into a fit and told them to get on the plane and go away. So here we are looking sort of scruff officers. This is Willie White, Tim Buxton and myself. And you can see we had the desert Guernseys with the 7th Brigade patch on, Chinese fighting. I mean, it was cold in the winter, beautiful, clear, cold, sunny days. We did have a few storms as well. We also had the engineers went and blew up a couple of their Averies. And these aren't my pictures, they're snaffled from Facebook, but I mean, literally, that was my view of what was, it's probably more like this one down, the one at the bottom right, of what happened that day. Apparently, one of the guys was cleaning the back decks with petrol. It's a petrol vehicle, not diesel, and they're cleaning the back decks with petrol or something like that. And it was utterly amazing. No one was even injured, I don't think, in that incident. But that was incredible. It literally rained Avery that day, and one of those bits of shrapnel, a sprocket from one of the wagons, so the sort of wheel bit here, landed about 20 meters away as we all stood in awe of that explosion. I have shed blood for my country. This is the medic trying to jam a drip into me, not very successfully. I felt a bit wobbly. Pete went to get me a nice glass of water, or mug of water, which put me right. But that was not a happy occasion. And there's me with my combat map. And the whole crew with the map. You can see the size of it. Well, imagine being folded in, or trying to deal with that when you're going to war. And of course, it was miles and miles and nothing on there. I mean, it's just grid squares, really. There wasn't really a lot on the map, but I'll show you a bit of that in a moment. We had endless meetings where we went off to get briefings. And so this is me all there with my NBC gear. And now you see I've got a Iniba jacket, sort of Northern Ireland thing with a bulletproof thing front and back, I think it had, and sort of shrapnel thing jacket here, and heading off to an O group. Okay, and now we're ready for the war bit. So this is Toby Madison here, about to give us a brief. There's a Tiffy, the Artificer Sergeant Major, ready to do it. So we're going to go and we're going to see if this works, team. We're going to go to tape number 2, and let's see if we've got everything lined up to give you a bit of speak. So stand by.
Now, 20:07 on G-Day. We've moved early from the regimental staging area up on the way to the staging area 3 itself. We moved a lot earlier than we thought, nearly about 15 hours earlier than we thought we'd have to move. So obviously things are going quite well outside the border. And we've heard that the Big Red One have caught 1,000 POWs so far, and they're continuing to press on. It's obviously dark here now, but everyone's driving with dipped headlights on. So it just shows you a measure of our arrogance or the confidence that the Iraqi air patrols aren't going to make it through here. And looking behind me now, see the convoy stretching back for miles and miles back into the desert.
Okay, I hope that came across. Pete, could you slightly confirm that you could hear that okay? Over.
Yeah, I could absolutely brilliantly. So I think that was great. So I hope everyone else could too.
Excellent, good. Well, as we were sitting here waiting, and you can imagine the air war was going on, and the B-52s were flying over us, and we could see them flying over southern Iraq and then curling back, the contrails and left in the sky. We were wandering around the battlefield one day. We came across a Saudi soldier with a rifle in the middle of nowhere in a big hole. And we had a look in the big hole, and look, there's a bit of shrapnel that could be from a Scud missile that went slightly awry. And so that's a bit of Russia, I guess, perhaps, that we brought back from the desert there. And one day we were sitting in our squadron, in our troop hides, in our position, and a cruise missile with 2 A-10s in formation behind it flew at no more than 50 feet across the top of us and headed out towards Iraq. So they must have been on their way to hit some target in particular. So let's move on. We're having our O group. We're moving up to staging area 3. To give you a bit of a map now. So just off the map to the south is staging area 3, and you can see the lines through the breach area made by the big red one. So this is what we're going to be covering now, and we're heading up to FUP, forming up position blue, which we're going to get we're going to get shaken out and ready to deploy by 15 hours on the 25th of Feb. So stand by. Let's go and do that journey now. So we're now in the wagon. Gas mask here on the left hand side. In a MBC suit with a Nomex flameproof overalls underneath. We had flash hoods as well. First aid, first field dressing there. Grenades behind my back, which might be responsible for my rather uncomfortable looking position. Little fan there, which was obviously quite good when it was hot. And then you got your commander's map here and all sorts of other controls related to thermal images and range readouts and so forth. So here we are, leaving staging area 3. And by now, you can see that we got the 2 55-gallon drums of diesel on the backs of the wagons to give us extra range. The Challenger, much more efficient tank than the Americans with gas turbine engines. And actually, by the war, we could have gone a lot further by the end of the war because we had that extra fuel on our wagons. But there we are, nice spacing, D squadron, well done, as we moved out towards the border area and straight into the mother of all traffic jams, which was where the border was, and there was a lot of hassle there. So let's get to tape 3 and just play what we got there. So stand by.
We're now stopped in a traffic jam about 500 metres short of the double berm which marks the border. There's a bit of traffic cutting to our front. And there's quite a lot of American vehicles that we can see the other side of the border.
Yes, there were a lot of American vehicles on the other side of the border. I've stole this photo from 54 Squadron RCT, but that was the sign we all drove past, or they were along all the breaches. Welcome to Iraq, courtesy of the big red one, the first infantry division who opened the breach for us, and we drove on through the breach and all the way up to the FUP. And here's the Artificer Sergeant Major with his 5.0 ready for action. And thank goodness he had a spare generator on the back of it, one of his wagons, because I needed it later on in the war. And here we are, D Squadron of the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars Battle Group, the point of the Allied spear, the point squadron for the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars Battle Group, the point for 7 Armoured Brigade, the point for 1st UK Division, and the point for 7th US Corps. So we were there. We were absolutely on the money. We were leading the whole Allied advance on this part. And on the way up to get to FUP Blue, we passed a number of 1ID artillery positions, and there were like stacks of shells there that they'd been through during the initial push into Iraq. So here we go, nice flat countryside. Again, good spacing, D Squadron, well out and across the nice flat desert there. And you can see the tank here scanning his arcs for targets. So there's your point tank, and I think we were the rear left on the arrowhead formation. So that is probably either the squadron leader's tank there or the 2 ICs moving into well, we're advancing to contact. Here we go. And oh, did I miss a tape there? I did. Let's go for tape 4 and see what happened. And if James Mosley's on the line, apologies for this, James. This is where your troop had a little bit of an issue with your gun kit.
3:45, we've crossed New Jersey. We're in the bad guys' land now. And we're heading northeast at the moment towards Zinc. Supposedly it's clear for the next about 5k. And then we get into the unclear territory where we'll have to do a bit more camping.
Okay, play that one a little bit late, so we'll come to James in a moment. So here we go. This is the next phase. So there's the FUP here. We're now going forward to objective Copper, through lines Larch and Rose, and then on to objective Zinc, which we get to the next day at 03:30 in the morning. So let's play. We've got a few tapes to play here. Let's see what happened over that time from the tank tape.
So it's 7 o'clock. Now on G+1, and we're sitting on the line Rose. Had a contact some berms or something with 30 Mosley's troops, and they said they'd engage it, and they failed to fire the guns. They had all sorts of problems, and then 3-2 had a problem with their CCMU, and the whole thing went for a bag of shit. The guns were going to fire, and the guns weren't allowed to fire. It's more like a bad exercise in the war. And now it's night, the rain's pissing down, visibility's crap, and we're just holding on this line, waiting for something to happen.
Yes, I'm afraid there were some additional expletives that had to be deleted as part of that broadcast. So let's go on. So we're there, we're sitting on Rose, waiting for things to happen. Let's go and find out what happens with the next tape.
It's now 1:15 on the morning of the 26th, and we've just reached objective Zinc. We've been sitting here about the last 2-3 hours, and there's an MLRS strike going in about 2K to the front. Sounds like a great bang from behind us. You can see the rockets fly over the top, and all to our front, the horizon is lit up by the explosions, red, bright explosions of the MLRS rockets. We've all pulled back to the west of the 30 easting, and we're waiting while the strike goes in on area Zinc. Once the MLRS strike has got in, I guess more artillery will go in, and then the Staffords and the Scots DGs will come in from the north and do their clear up.
Well, that was the most incredible fireworks display that anyone can imagine. It was chucking it down with rain at that time. And for the last 24 hours, we've been sitting there with our heads boiling, with a battle group net coming in one ear and the squadron net in the other ear. But it was mainly just static. And we ended up crawling along. Although we had a satellite navigation system, one per every troop leader's tank, but by the time we got to that bit of the night, the satellites had dropped over the horizon, and so we stopped. We were at that stage, we were reduced to following everyone by turning on the convoy lights, something you just wouldn't have thought about in general war in West Germany. But the weather was so atrocious that's where we ended up. So let's go to the next tape and hear what's going on then.
It's now 1:15 on the morning of the 26th, and we've just reached objective Zinc. We've been sitting here about the last 2-3 hours, and there's an MLRS.
Sorry, we've done that one. Let's go to the next one.
Right, it's now 4:30 in the morning. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and we just had our first action against what we thought was possibly guns all lined out, but they're about 46 vehicles. We took them on at far too far away because we all got a bit cap happy, and people started plowing Hesh rounds into a ridge line about 100 meters in front of us. So we wasted 6 Hesh and 1 Fin, and it looks like we got 2 miles in the distance. They've left behind about 15 or 20 just sitting in the position, and could be a dummy position. We're holding now at the moment, and we don't expect to go forward until dawn is starting to break at about 5:30, in about half an hour. So, bit of a waste of time. We could have pursued them and engaged them closer, which would have been a lot more exciting. But we stood off and engaged them a long way, which was good fun and good to get a few rounds down, but I don't think we really achieved that much.
Good fun and good to get a few rounds down. Well, there we go. That's the attitude of a young and naive troop leader for you. Let's move on then. So let's see where we get to next. And here we are on the battlefield the next morning. And as dawn came up, you can see it's slightly hazy. But as dawn came up, we started to see enemy tanks dug in behind berms in positions all across our front, and we started picking them off. So let's listen to the next tape and see what's happening.
We're now consolidating on this position that we've just attacked. It's quite large. So we took out a T-55 at about 3,600 meters, and then another petrol type vehicle at about 4,700 with Finn, which is bloody good shooting.
Yes, it sure was. And for a very long time, I thought that was the longest kill of the war, until just a few weeks ago, someone from the Scots DG rang me up and said, "You do realise our commanding officer hit something at 5,100 metres?" And so rather shamefacedly, I can claim the longest kill in our part of the battlefield, or one of the longest. But anyway, it was a pretty significant difference and a great testament to the gunner Gus Davidson and to the equipment that we had, the Challenger 1 main battle tank. So that was great. And we saw a lot of these POWs suddenly coming out of the ground. And who can blame them, really? Because they'd been thrashed from the air for the last month, literally. And then we turn up the night before with their MLRS strike and artillery strikes, and then our tanks start picking off things all around them. And so they'd had a lot of PSYOPs leaflets dropped on them, and I had a few here. Maybe I'll see if I can find them in a moment. So they came. You can see this guy at the front here has got something there. It could be a PSYOPs leaflet or something like that to do their surrender. So let's just have tape 9, and I'll go and see if I can find those PSYOPs leaflets for you.
Now 1:30 in the afternoon of G plus 2. 1. G plus 1. 2? Yeah, we went in on G plus 1 the 25th. Right, G plus 1. And this morning we took out those things that I talked about before, and we sat there for a while and watched the C squadron come down from the north. And now we're moving sort of southeast from that position, taking out a few more T-55s. Most seem to have been abandoned, and it's rather pathetic to see all these people who are just surrendering straight away. They just have their white flags out and all being herded together and passed back down the centre line.
Yes, well, again, another rather naive attitude. I mean, these guys, like I say, had been thrashed for the last wee while, and so they weren't really in any position to take anything against us in a way. And when we moved down to that southerly position, we ended up with we were driving through a sandstorm. It ended up being about turret high, and a T-55 came blundering out of that sandstorm and literally got a squadron barrage to the left as we all engaged him on that side of the squadron. And then we had to avoid driving too close. And when our tank we parked up the whole squadron along what we thought was a minefield, and a bloke suddenly popped out of the ground right in front of my wagon, and we traversed round to look at him. You know, it's coex man on, just in case there was a danger, but he had no RPG, no weapon, tears pouring down his face, shirt was undone, his no boots and everything like that. And as soon as he realized we weren't going to kill him, and we waved him over, he brought another few blokes out of the ground. They sat next to our wagon. We pointed them over at Alex Payne, who's the battle captain, where they were collating all the prisoners, and they trotted over there. And like these guys on the screen now, they walked back down the centre line. That's all that we could do with them. Obviously, you're in a tank. You've got 4 people there squashed in. You can't take prisoners yourself. We were just pushing them all behind us where there were others picking them up. So moving on now, we're up here somewhere. We just moved down into Objective Platinum. And then we're coming back up here through Objective Lead. And this is the Wadi al-Batin, the mystical western border of Kuwait. And we're going to cross the Wadi al-Batin and head up to Objective Varsity over the next few slides. So let's carry on with that. Here we are. The next morning, we'd leaguered up that night. And in the middle of the night, blooming MLRS had woken us all up with another strike on the next day's objective. Amazingly, Corporal Urbax, my troop corporal who'd broken down in the breach, found us in the middle of the night. He'd driven 160 kilometers across the desert and found us in the middle of the night. It was an incredible achievement, but he's back with us, engine fixed. And here we are going across the desert over towards the Kuwaiti border, picking off targets as we went and they came up. And this is the Wadi al-Batin. And there is the first tank across from the squadron, or one of the first tanks into Kuwait. So now we have gone from an invasion of southeastern Iraq into the liberation of Kuwait by crossing the Wadi al-Batin. And here we go. Here's the map again. This is a bit of Iraq here. This is Kuwait. This is where we came from. And we're crossing the border around about here on the Wadi al-Batin. And there's looking back at the Wadi. There's Corporal Irby's tank, and that's the Wadi. So it's a thing, the Wadi al-Batin. And now we were in Kuwait. So we leaguered up in Objective Varsity for the night. And it was all pretty quiet. We went into what's called a counter penetration line. We were pointing north. One thing I neglected to say, have I missed out any tapes? Yes, tape 10, sorry. Let's go to tape 10 and see what's happening then.
Now 11:30 in the morning, it looks like we just had our first casualty because of a blue-on-blue strike. American M1A1 came and engaged Victor 2-1 and 2-2, who were trying to take some EPWs. And the American tanks came down from the north, fired a main armament at 2-1 and Coac 2-2. The operator of 2-1's got severe head injuries, and the operator of 2-2 has got an arm injury. There are all kinds of ambulances and helicopters coming in, and hopefully we'll have it all sorted out. But it's unbelievable. The first casualty would have to be a blue-on-blue casualty.
So there we go. That's Al Murdoch and his troop, and they were doing exactly the right thing. They were on the interdivisional boundary here, and they went to secure the capture of a number of enemy prisoners of war. And as they were doing that, they were engaged by the Americans. And you can see how close. I mean, that's my tank there. But if we'd gone up there, and then we could have ended up having a nasty blue-on-blue tank fratricide, which would not have been good. As it was not good anyway. But luckily, although there were a couple of guys who were injured there, they all managed to get out of it unscathed. But that's the battle map of that. So sorry about going back there. Let's go on. Objective Varsity. Now we're into the last phase of the war. We were in this counter-penetration line here for the night, waiting for the Tawaklana division equipped with T-72 Russian tanks come down and attack us here. But of course, we got an American division to our north, protecting our flank. But we waited there. That's when my generator broke on my tank, and we toddled off to see the TIFI and the LAD detachment, the light aid detachment, to fix that. They did a brilliant job of fixing that. And then the plan was, well, we didn't really know what the plan was until we kind of woke up the next morning, and this is what happened at very early o'clock.
Now 11 in the morning.
No, we're going to this one.
Now 0700 on the 28th, and we suddenly had orders in the middle of the night to advance eastwards very, very fast to do a VCP and investigate a barracks. We're doing that now. We're passing a number of defensive positions, which are sorry for troops. Sorry, it's all abandoned. No people around here at all. We just passed the Kamuga Road where abandoned BMP was. We're not quite sure what the scenario is up ahead, but we're cracking on.
Now, I think that charge on the last day of this war was the longest and fastest charge ever conducted by any cavalry anywhere in the world. And we were, as I recollect, we were line abreast almost, 150 tanks. So we were the 600 heading towards the Russian guns that were defending the Iraqi positions north of Kuwait City as we charged westwards at maximum speed. And we lost, I think we lost James Mosley on the way. His tank fell into a bunker system. But we arrive at, this is about a few kilometers short of the Basra Road, which stretches from north of Kuwait City to Basra in southern Iraq. And you can see the clouds coming down because they'd lit up all the oil wells. And so there's massive pollution clouds. You can just about make out Challenger tanks here. But what is this? And that is a Gazelle recce helicopter. And I only found out this week that was choppered by Major David Gell, who's a mate of mine. And I only found that out this week. So that was a good connection there. But as you can see, he's about turret height because the weather is so grim, trying to find out what's going on. And then the weather cleared as we crossed the Basra Road, and this is the sort of this is one bit of the highway here, and there's the other bit of the highway there, the central reservation here. As you can see, we've all broken out Union Jacks, and we've got high-vis marker panels, air recognition panels on the back. This time we'd heard about the awful blue-on-blue where an A-10 had taken out one of the Fusiliers battle group warriors and killed quite a number of our soldiers. And so we were very aware of the aircraft above us now, and we didn't want to get pinged at this very late stage of the war. So here we are arriving at the Basra Highway, last few moments of the war, massive pylon lines. They were all down on the floor just in front of us, things slowing down. We now crossed the road, coming to a halt, and literally it's the closing stages of the war. And so just give you a feel for it. We'd crack through the Wadi al-Batin around here. We'd come straight pretty much east on that charge because we had to be there by 0800 in the morning. And we ended up in this position just by these power lines here, north of this complex. And north, there's Kuwait City. So we're about sort of 20, 40 clicks north of Kuwait City. And there are the Russian guns. There they are, a Russian D-30 artillery piece pointing southwards. And no need to spike the guns this time. There were no gunners there to put our lances or sabers through. They'd all abandoned ship. And we just, we had a look around. There was a bit of a panic for booby traps and mines and so forth. There were none, luckily. And so we got on with what soldiers do, having a good snoop around and see what was there. I understand that there might have been a quartermaster's bunker found with some Zeiss binos and other interesting goodies like that. But we were all fairly careful about going in and around there. So in summary, then the war came, we started over here 100 hours before, moved through the FUP, through these objectives, crossed the Wadi al-Batin and crossed, now liberating Kuwait, and ended up somewhere here just north of Kuwait City. And so it was time to go and pick up a few souvenirs that we could find. Even a T-50 tank that was lying around got driven into Battle Group headquarters. There's my tank at the end of the war. I'm a bit of a shorty, so I had the fitters help me make a ladder that I could climb up, and that's a good shot of the explosive reactive armor on the front of the wagon, and I could climb up much more easily and jump and get down because my little old legs getting up on the top of the tank. And then we are all set up nice and dandy at the end of the war. The Americans came to visit us. That was a nice tank, we thought, all nice and clean inside, and very well designed ergonomically. We had General Sapita de la Billiere come and have a chat to us, and we had General Rupert Smith, who's our divisional commander, came to talk to us as well. And the boys got on with that's a Challenger a decoy. We were supposed to plonk them sort of to the left and right 100 yards away from 100 meters away from the tank, and hopefully the bad guys would shoot that turret, not us. We turned it into a kite, and it flew rather well actually, because it was quite breezy. In the background there you can see that complex I pointed out, and in there I think someone found a sort of white stallion, so I don't know whose that was, and that got purloined. And on the last day, as we flew out of Kuwait, the weather came in and all the pollution clouds came in. It got very dark and mysterious in the middle of the day, and we were thrown in the back of Hercules aircraft at some rough and ready built strip very near to where we were, left our tanks behind. They'd come down in tank transporters with the drivers later, and we flew back down through the burning oil wells, and it was like flying over Dante's Inferno. It was incredible. All these oil wells, spewing out flames to a great height, and black clouds of pollution. And it wasn't long before Red Adair, the expert American oil man, was called in to come and put them back. And of course, we left Saddam in power in Iraq. And so I just thought I'd finish off by saying, where are they now? Top left, rather dashing photograph of the commanding officer, Arthur Denaro, former SAS officer, went on to become a major general and commandant of the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. Chris Millett left the army, then joined up again, and the medical side, and he now looks like Kenny Everett when you walk around and see him at a mess dinner, because he's got that many medals, been on every operation you can imagine. Alex Cormack did some reserve time, I think. Toby went off to Kenya to run a flower business with Melissa, and now retired. Philip ended up a brigadier in the army, now the clerk of the Saddlers Company. That's me. Then there's Alex Payne, became a banker, now puts Europe right with banking. Webbo, sports marketing. Paul Sanford became an entrepreneur. Al Murdoch is chief burger flipper for Burger King. He's the chief executive officer of Burger King, very successful there. Nick Cotton went into banking. Will Wyatt runs his family company in the city. Tim Buxton in property. Piers Hankinson stayed on to become a brigadier in the army, and now works for a defense company. And I say, because our friendships were forged in war, we stick together. And every year, the Irish Hussars have, and organised by Marco here, have brought us together for a dinner once a year where we all get together. And it's a great friendship that's lasted a lifetime. And you can see, here's Mark O'Reilly, who was a 2IC. And here is His Excellency, the Ambassador for Kuwait, Khalid Al-Dwizan, who's a great friend of ours. And he's the doyen of the diplomatic corps, been the ambassador longer than anyone else. And as you can see in this picture also, wearing the Kuwait and the Saudi miniatures as well, we're not allowed to wear them by Her Majesty because the Queen gave us this one here, and there are not many soldiers wearing that medal anymore. I think the Chief of the General Staff is wearing one, but he said to me that we can't talk about what he was doing. And here are the Saudi and the Kuwaiti miniatures. And I think that seeing the ambassador there really reminds us all that this was about the liberation of Kuwait. Peter, over to you.
Thanks so much, Tim. I mean, you can't see any of the comments in the chat, but they are absolutely fantastic. I mean, that audio in particular is amazing to be able to sort of, you know, we've been doing this a lot, but the past year and taking people back to talk about these things, but to actually take people back and hear it as it was from the people who were there is just remarkable. So thank you very much for that. We've got some great questions.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Better?
Great, thanks. We've got a lot of questions. One of the things I actually wanted to ask you is, and it's something that you sort of mentioned a couple of times, you know, you talked about the differences, but obviously being, you know, in Germany, you know, you used to use the convoy lights you never use in Germany. You said, how did you shift out of, you know, fighting in, you know, can I park my Panzer in your barn, etc., to, and you know, the experience and the expectation about what war was going to be into adapting in the desert?
Yeah, I think we adapted reasonably quickly. You know, we were trained to fight in a very dense environment with, you know, in villages and towns and maybe even cities and the countryside, and lots of woods and fields and what have you, including asparagus fields, Uncle Reg. So adapting to the desert, we look back at our heritage of 7th Armoured Brigade, and you saw that we were very proudly wearing the desert rat on our uniforms, and no, I think we had some excellent opportunities at training, and so we quite quickly got into it. And you're young and you're very adaptable. You just get on with it.
I mean, and was there a conscious sort of, you know, you mentioned the desert rat there. Was there a conscious sort of looking back and saying, well, actually, how do we fight in the desert? You know, how much did the Second World War, the North African campaign there, influence what you were doing? I mean, did anyone break out the old training manuals or anything like that, or was it, you know, or was it just, you know, let's learn on the job, let's spend our time waiting to really get up on our skills and drills?
No, I think we did. Before we went, we had a number of lectures about desert warfare and what it was like. I can't fully recollect whether we had any veterans from World War II come and talk to us, but that would have been a sensible thing to do. And I certainly think that probably in the training organisations in the army, they were digging out the manuals from 1940s to find out what was done and how to do it. I mean, they did make a few mistakes. I mean, we did get a sun compass sent to us. I mean, we weren't Bagnalled, and we weren't the long range desert group earning our way across the Qattara Depression, or you know, and so forth. So I'm afraid that's buried in the desert somewhere. But you know, we were incredibly well supported. We could do laundry. We did have the anthrax jab, and we had the NAPS tablet to deal with chemical warfare. But you know, water, mail. I mean, it was incredible how well we were supported, and particularly when the kind of noise got back about how we were feeling a little bit morose in the desert. You know, suddenly we're inundated with mail, and that developed sort of lots of good relationships. And I imagine some might continue to today. Yeah,
I mean, you can imagine you want to find a Second World War veteran in Munster in 1990. You're more likely to find someone from the Africa Corps than anything else. Exactly. But I mean, you mentioned the anthrax jab there. I mean, how much, I guess, time given over in training, but also how much concern was there about the possible use of MBC in chemical weapons?
Well, again, MBC was something we trained for very much in Western Europe, in West Germany. We trained to deal in an MBC environment. God help us if we'd actually had to do it, because it's very debilitating. If you've ever, I don't know whether you've ever tried it all on and run around like a headless chicken, but it really does you down, especially in that kind of heat. I mean, we took the MBC hoses from the tank and shoved them down our trousers, just to keep on our front of our shirts, to keep a bit of cool air flowing. I mean, not that the MBC pack is an air conditioning pack, it's just filtering the air, but it was blowing something to keep us cool. Yes, there was a concern, and we had the NIAID detectors, the chemical detectors, all deployed correctly at the right time. So we did take it very seriously, and we, as you saw from some of the pictures, we did carry our MBC gear around with us in order to do that, and we had the various tablets as well.
Jordan's asked a really, I think, quite a key question, particularly from your, relatively, particular experience of having come from one regiment and serving with in a different battle group. But how important were regimental identities, in these times of war? Did you carry forward, and how much did you sort of consciously, deliberately throw back to what the motto represented and all that sort of thing with you?
Yeah, we had 4 troops of 17th 21st Lancers deployed in each of the squadrons of the Irish Hussars, and I think that we were very conscious that we were Lancers, and we wanted to sort of keep and maintain our identity. But the Colonel Arthur was absolutely right in splitting us up. I mean, the 17th 21st had been in West Germany for 10 years, and we're good at gunnery, good on exercise, good at partying, and I think he split down the expertise. I mean, some of those soldiers that we had, they were the best of the regiment that we sent. No, I mean, not to put down the rest of the guys who didn't manage to get the call, but we sent our best soldiers there, and I think that helped lift the Irish Hussars, who just got back from Catterick. I know Colonel Arthur General Arthur might say different, but I think we helped each other. While retaining our identities. I mean, you saw in some of the pictures we put the motto on the wagons. We were definitely 17th 21st Lancers, and that kind of joshing has continued down the years with our friendship at the Basra Road Dining Club. But we are really good friends.
I mean, just on that note about the people that did, was there much competition in the regiment to, were people sort of fighting by tooth and claw to be the people that got sent out there? I mean, how was that selection done?
That's well, I don't know. I wasn't the commanding officer. Robert Gordon was the commanding officer. Ended up being a major general. So him and Andrew Hughes must have decided who was going to go in consultation with the squadron leaders. I, of course, was in Northern Ireland. I was jumping up and down on the phone, calling Andrew Hughes the whole time. Saying, he was saying, "Get lost, go away. You're already on operations," that kind of thing. And then the call came, and there were lots of green-eyed monsters in Northern Ireland, because I was heading off to what looked like the most exciting operation that the army had done in the last sort of X years, and made my way back to Germany. So yeah, that selection had been done at the regiment.
And I'm just going to go back to some of the questions now from the other group. There's been a question about the air threat and that sort of thing, and I mean, it's quite interesting. You talked about there that the putting the recognition panels on to basically let the A-10s know that you were friendly forces rather than anything else. I mean, had much been given? I mean, in terms of that, I guess the wider intelligence piece, did you know what the Iraqis had in terms of air capability? Did you know that they were going to be completely degraded before you moved? I mean, did that give you confidence in doing some of the stuff that you did moving across the desert? Because, as you said, there is no cover. There's not many places you can actually hide.
Yeah. I mean, we did work out some SOPs, how you deal with an air attack coming in, low strafing and bomb bursting around, going in a starburst and then coming back on the axis to just confuse it for the aircraft. But actually, after a month of being hit by the Royal Air Force, the US Air Force, and other friends, the Iraqi Air Force had been so degraded that it meant that on that first day of the war, it was all brought forward. Norman Schwarzkopf advanced the tempo of the operation, and we could drive up with our headlights on. I mean, we were supposed to go up on tank transporters and everything like that to save more track mileage and fuel and everything, but we just drove up to the staging area with our headlights on. I mean, the unbelievable arrogance, as you probably heard in that tape. But the Iraqi air threat had been totally degraded by then, and we had not just air superiority, we had air supremacy.
David's asked a question about the sort of the point at which the war effectively comes to an end. Obviously, hindsight being 2020, and we know what happens in 2003. But at that stage, I mean, was there, purely from your level, I mean, was there any discussions about, well, why do we not keep going? Why are we not driving north up the Basra Road? Or was it just, it's done, let's pack everything up, let's get home as quickly as we can?
The latter. We were quite pleased to have done it all, and we did hear some sort of chit chat about going further on. But we had gone there to execute a UN Security Council resolution, and we had done that. We had liberated Kuwait, and that was the important thing. And I think that was quickly recognised, really, at all levels. We had achieved the aim.
funny, you mentioned the media as well, and you said the media came around and saw you. I mean, obviously, you ended up spending some time with the media later in your career in a different part of the world. I mean, how? I guess for one thing, how did you see the media at the time when you were in the desert, and then how did you see the relationship between the media and the military, but also how they inform the public change across your career, and then when you come up against them again when you're working in Afghanistan?
Well, I think we were very pleased to see them, and we had Martin Bell was in our squadron for the war, in the back of Alex Payne's wagon, in the back of Zero Delta with Nigel Bates and his cameraman. And so we were very pleased and proud that our war was going to be reported by alongside Kate Adie, the BBC's top reporter. And so it was great, and we saw Kate Adie, and in fact Kate and Martin are both members of the Basra Dining Club, and we see them regularly every year, apart from last year, of course, and this year, sadly. So I think the relationship was very good. We were pleased that the attention was on us, and we could talk about what we were going to do, so pretty good.
And finally, and I'd probably be remiss if I didn't ask at least some kind of technical question. But Graham was asked about obviously, because you were in the Challenger tank, which was relatively new at the time. It had been road tested in Germany, obviously in the mid '80s, and then was equipped out. And now obviously the army's moved on to Challenger 2, and the slight controversies around that perhaps. But the latest upgrade, of course, for that is the sort of the suggestion that they might move back to a smoothbore barrel. And Graham's asked if you could offer an observation on secondary natures of the smoothbore barrel, either Hesh or smoke. I have to say this is completely beyond me, because I do the human factor. I do the human factor at war. I let the smarter people worry about the technical stuff. But I just wondered from your very practical experience whether you had anything to offer on that.
I don't really have a valid point of view, not being a gunnery officer myself. I think, we were in effectively a T-85, and we were up against T-55s. I say T-55 because it was first seen in 1955. T-72 first seen in 1972. We were in a T-85. We had 30 years tech on the bad guys, and that meant that when we were picking them off on that first morning in the war, when we could see them appearing sort of 3,000 meters away, that we could see them, but they probably couldn't see us, even if they were in their tank trying to do something against us. So we had just supreme technology over them. And I know that I think it's a T-72 has a smoothbore weapon and can fire a missile, and so that was a danger potentially for us, and that's why we were given the Jericho round, the depleted uranium round, and we had about 16 of them on board, and we stored our bread and eggs amongst them. And when we handed them back at the end of the war, all the loggies who we handed them back to were all wearing full NBC. We said, hang on a minute, guys, why are you wearing full NBC gear? And they said, don't you know the danger of these things? And I'm like, what do you mean danger? We've been putting our bread and eggs in amongst them. Anyway, so that was DU rounds for you. We didn't actually fire any. Some people did.
Great. It's again, you can still find the humour in some of that stuff as well. The style of dress remains the same from the desert. The black humour remains the same from the desert. It's one of these enduring natures, I think, of the British Army, that all this stuff continues across the generations and into different campaigns, and we see it all the time in the National Army Museum. So that's great. So thanks very much for that. Unfortunately, I think we've run out of time, so I think we're gonna have to pull stumps there, and I still think we might have lasted longer than England in the second innings yesterday. So I think we've done brilliantly. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Can I just say thanks to all those who signed up? It was really kind of you. I don't know how many we had, not that the numbers count, it's the quality of the audience, of course. But thank you all very much for showing out and listening to my war.
Yeah, and like what from the National Army Museum perspective, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We bring this stuff to you every week, and I think we sometimes people surprise ourselves with how good some of this stuff turns out. So really, it's been brilliant to have so many of you not only come here and learn from Tim, but also share so many of your own experiences too, having taken part in this campaign. We in the museum, we try and sometimes it's tough. The history of the British Army is quite extensive, but we try and cover as much as we can. So it's wonderful to be able to bring some people with, for whom this is a lived experience, so we can actually share it a lot more. With all these free talks that we've been putting on for you over the past 9 months, digitally as well, I think we've hit a good rhythm. and we've tried really hard to continue to bring you the best history we can, despite the circumstances. We now have a donation function set up on this page. Right there at the bottom, you'll be able to see it next to the chat box. So should you be in a position to do so, we ask you if you could contribute a small amount to the museum's work at this difficult time. We'd be extremely grateful. I will also be aware that it takes it in dollars. This is not don't be too surprised if it comes up and asks you for dollars. It's not a scam or anything like that. Tim's taking photo evidence just in case it is. But no, if you could leave a donation, that'd be absolutely fantastic. And of course, as sad as we are to leave things today, I'll remind you about next week's talk, which we're going to jump back 90 years or so from the events of today, and we're going to move continent as well. That is the beauty of the British Army's history. We can do this. And Spencer Jones is going to talk to us about the Boer War. I hope to see as many people as you there. Once again, thank you so much for joining in. The new listeners, thank you for joining us. It's been great to see. For the regulars, again, thank you for your ongoing support. But most importantly, and ladies and gentlemen, please join me now when I say thank you to you, Tim, for absolutely fascinating insight into what your war was like, and for entertaining us all on this Friday afternoon. So a virtual round of applause for you. So thank you very much. But apart from that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm very, very looking forward to seeing you next time. But in the meantime, have a great day, have a great weekend, and stay safe. Cheers. Take care.